good afternoon to all the participants. I'm going to go ahead and kick us off here. If we can move to the next slide. Today's webinar about how due diligence can uncover supply chain risk. Just wanted to take a few moments to take a look at that statement and actually take a step back. And before we jump into the how, ask the question why. Why is it really important to know your suppliers, especially in today's market? On the screen, you'll see a short list, 3 items that are top of my mind. I suspect that they may be top of your mind as well in terms of ongoing concerns, that being cost control, supply continuity, and reputational protection. And these have been ongoing and constant for years for supply management professionals. However, there are some global trends that are making that challenge a bit more difficult. So the first one, increasing supplier globalization. More and more our suppliers are providing services and products, and the supply chains are getting longer and more geographically dispersed. This is leading to lost visibility. It's just harder to understand where all the bits and pieces are. Second, regulations are impacting supply management professionals. There's a number of them out there. The Foreign Corrupt Practices Act has been around for a number of years, but the introduction of the UK Preventing Bribery Act, along with California's Transparency Supply Chain Act, as well as Dodd-Frank, is certainly targeting more and more supply chain as a vehicle for regulatory compliance. And it's forcing us as professionals to go beyond just looking at our critical suppliers, but to also look beyond that and beyond the tier 1. Lastly, oftentimes we are needing to not only do the due diligence, but we need to make sure that the information we're using is credible. We know where the sources are. There's lots of information out on the web, but sometimes its credibility can come in question, as well as making sure that we don't fall victim to the information overload. So the information needs to be targeted. It needs to be repeatable so that we run the reports consistently. We know where the content is coming from in order to enable us from an audit perspective. Just to help put some numbers around this, because let's face it, cost is a big driver for what we do. Large organizations have been reported to spend an average of $10 million per year on supply chain disruptions. This comes from a corporate executive report from a few years back. Another one that's out there, Hendricks and Singhal, took a look at over 800 companies, and over a period of 10 years, roughly a third of them experienced depressed, underperforming stock returns as compared to their benchmarks for their industries. Regardless of whether or not you believe these numbers are inflated or not, it sends a very clear signal that there is a real cost associated with pricing issues, continuity, and reputation for supply disruptions. If we can move on to the next slide. I would also suggest that the cost can actually go beyond just the P&L. We've all at this point heard the stories of coming out of Bangladesh and some of the factory fires in garment manufacturing locations. What's very sad about this is that in this particular case, there was a number of warning signs in the news that was foreshadowing things were not going well. And in fact, just prior to the fatal fire from November 20, just prior to November 25th, there was actually a report that was out there if folks were looking for it around the fact that the recommendations around fire and exits were not being rolled out as quickly as they should be. As a direct result, this tragedy occurred. So it comes as no great surprise when we started to look at this market space and opportunities for investment that in different companies are looking to make investments here around market intelligence. That spans process, resources, and tools. In fact, if you take a look at a Hackett study that was put out in 2013, there was about a 2/3 increase in terms of companies that were looking to invest in this space. Since that report came out from Hackett, IBM's actually published another report. And what's particularly interesting here is when the CPOs were asked, what are their priorities for today, and looking out 3 years, where do they see those priorities shifting? At the very top of their list was this need for understanding supplier relationships. If we can move forward one slide. This idea of needing a 360-degree global view of supplier relationships not only was at the top of the list for 3 years out, but it single-handedly moved the quickest up the chain. This is only emphasizing the need that companies are seeing and chief procurement officers are seeing for truly understanding supplier relationships and going beyond just what the information they have within their own four walls, but also bringing in information from the suppliers themselves as well as third-party intelligence so that you can get a holistic picture. You can move forward. So at this moment, what I'd like to do is do a quick poll question. If we can go ahead and bring up the poll. I'm very curious among the audience members here, which types of market intelligence do you want to use more in your supplier diligence? And notice the word more is underlined. I want to get a gauge from the audience here of where are your heads on a forward-looking basis in terms of information sources you want to start using more in your diligence processes. I'll go ahead and go down this list. News and market analysis, internet and social media, legal, compliance, corporate information, and company financial health. Yeah, so it's a few more moments just to go ahead and submit their final results. There we go. So it looks like corporate information, company health, and news and market analysis is bubbling up to the top. Not surprising if we can move to the next slide. The company financial health scores predictably come to the top of most due diligence needs. In fact, Procurement Intelligence Unit about a year or so ago put out a study where they were quoted as saying roughly 80%, but a clear majority of procurement organizations rely on financial health scores. But what we also are finding more and more in the marketplace is folks want to go beyond, and I think the poll questions here nicely reflect that in terms of the news and market analysis, corporate information, and compliance, of being able to peel back and go beyond just the financials, but to actually look at other types of information that can help provide a more holistic review of where there's risk. If you take a look at the slide that's up on your screen now, if you can go back one, thank you. Aberdeen Group back in June of 2012 went ahead and asked this question. It was very interesting. Best-in-class companies came back and noted above all the others that legal, risk compliance, watch list, blacklist, and sanctions were key inputs to their assessment and due diligence of risk in the marketplace. We can go ahead and move forward. So when it comes to trying to understand what risk is out there and moving now away from the why do we need to do this, but how do you actually do due diligence in an effective way so that you can reap the rewards, oftentimes it's very helpful to not try to absorb risk in its entirety, but take a moment to actually segment it out, because that segmentation and just the whole concept of breaking the big problem down into pieces becomes a crucial part of putting together a risk management program. LexisNexis has adopted the PESTLE model, and if you're not familiar with PESTLE, PESTLE simply stands for political, economic, societal, technical, legal, and environmental. And by doing this, it helps helps organization be able to break the bigger risk management challenge down into smaller pieces so that you can start to focus in on the right audience, looking at the right types of information, getting the right kinds of targeted alerts and the right type of diligence reporting so that it can be documented, so that when you put it together as the pestle model here suggests, you can actually stitch together a more robust due diligence program. We can move forward. So, got two more poll questions to help us kind of get an idea from this audience's perspective. First question will be about alerts. The second question will be about diligence, documentation. So poll question number 2, what kinds of alerts would best help you manage supply risk? The 3 options here, and please select one. Risk alerts designed to monitor a portfolio of suppliers, so maybe the spend that makes up 80% of the spend. Alternatively, a more narrow approach, risk alerts associated with a handful of suppliers. And lastly, a risk alerts associated with a handful of very specific issues. So in this, as an example, in the banking industry right now, there's quite a bit of concern around third-party service provider management. Give folks a chance to select one of the 3 options here. If you haven't selected it yet, go ahead and do so now, and the results should be popping up here momentarily. So what I'm seeing here in the results is that the majority of folks are most concerned with monitoring a portfolio of suppliers, followed by a then select set of suppliers. And actually, this is in line with what we've seen out in the marketplace, because one of the challenges that we are observing is that while the roles and responsibilities of supply management professionals are expanding, their ability to get additional headcount is remaining flat or certainly not growing as fast as the demand. So this need to be able to efficiently and effectively monitor more suppliers with fewer people is certainly a trend. It's interesting to see that here in the poll results. If we can move on to the next poll, this is a question around due diligence reporting. 3 options here for you to choose from. Trying to better understand from your perspective, when documenting due diligence, which of the following is most important? So option 1, the ability to save parameters to ensure that the reports are done consistently period after period. Create an aggregated report with formatting controls, so then that way there's not a lot of manual ad hoc work afterwards. And the last option here, the ability to document the query results along with timestamping in order to be prepared for audit reviews. And I'll give you a moment here to go ahead and select one of the 3 options. Again, the 3 options, the ability to save query parameters to drive consistency in your process, create an aggregated report when formatting with formatting controls, so that way you can mitigate ad hoc work, and the ability to document the query parameters and timestamps in preparation for audit. And we'll give a poll responses here in a second. So it looks like here the 2 responses, the creating an efficient report and the ability to provide results that can be audited, are the winners. And again, not terribly surprising, especially in light of one of the big global trends that I'd mentioned earlier, is the need to be able to have a documented process that can go through the audit process. If we can move on to the next slide. So as I finish up here, and we're going to transition from the why to the how this can be done, just something for the audience participants to think about is that an effective supplier diligence program really does need a push-pull balance. And what do I mean by a push-pull balance? So in the previous 2 poll questions kind of get to this. The first one, under targeted alerts, there is information that you need pushed to you in order to be more proactive in what you're doing. But the challenge here is finding the right balance where it's pushing the most targeted, prioritized information. But also there are times when you need to be able to go in and be able to do ad hoc diligence report and be able to get those reports out as efficiently as possible and actually make it as easy as possible so that it doesn't necessarily rely on one person to be able to run all reports. So if you are at a place where you are attending this webinar because you're trying to piece together how a due diligence process and program could work for your company, I encourage you to think about this push-pull balance. And with that, I'm going to hand the presentation over to Karen Gray, who will pick it up from here.